Well, welcome to another edition of Creatives Chat. Hi, I'm Rusty.
I'm Peter.
And Peter, who have we got lined up for our show today?
Oh man, Creatives Chat's going down under. And we're highlighting an amazing community builder, an amazing leader, an overall manifester and creator of really just beautiful happenings. Michael Waite.
Michael Waite, phenomenal. Down under, huh?
Oh yeah, we're going to Australia, baby.
All right, I'll be monitoring the show from the background and I'll bring him up to the foreground. And if I have any questions, I'll come back later,
Awesome, let's get to it.
as always.
Oh, Michael, I'm super excited to have you on. How you been, man?
Good, mate. Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, just enjoying the beautiful weather while we still have it here in the Pacific Northwest. But how's everything going down in Australia?
It's coming to the end of winter, and so I miss that time of year. I think you're in one of the best places in the world, but yeah, we're coming off a winter here. So, although not as wet as it's been often, but yeah, I can do with some more heat.
Oh, I bet. I heard you guys had snow like a few weeks ago or in a
There's
few
little pockets,
areas.
yeah, that's right. Pockets in Australia that will get it. It's pretty rare. The first snow I ever saw was in Denver, Colorado, when got stuck on a flight in the US. So, yeah, it's not something you grow up with in Australia.
Oh, I bet. So I'm incredibly excited to have you on here because, I mean, I personally know you through a lot of the work that we've done, but just because you're a self-masterer, you make so many changes really wherever you've gone in your life. And I find that absolutely fascinating. So just for the listeners, so they can get a little bit of brief understanding about you, when did you first come to America and why?
Yeah, so I made in 1995. I had my first touchdown in America. And I think it sort of classically captures it. I landed. I remember coming for tennis, landed in Los Angeles, and saw like the police carrying big guns, and I was like, "Oh wow, this is real!" And then we flew directly from there to New Orleans, and
Wow.
then caught a Greyhound bus from downtown New Orleans to Lafayette, Louisiana, and then
Wow.
caught a taxi from the Greyhound bus station to a hotel that we just had booked for that night. And there was literally a hole in the floor of the taxi. And I just remember going, "Welcome to America." It was like a midnight, and it was hot. It was in a June in 1995. So,
Oh, wow.
um, and that was my welcome to America right there. We got dropped in Lafayette, Louisiana.
That's
But
such a
yes,
transition.
that was 95, and then it's been sort of on and off, but mostly on forever for since then. So it's been
Yeah.
crazy.
Dude, that's so intense just from Australia to Louisiana. You got to see the best of America in the
Yeah,
most humid, muggy time of the year.
yeah, it was amazing.
But that's one of the coolest things is that, you were a professional player, tennis player at one point, and that's exciting in and of itself. So what really got you into tennis? How did you make that jump from Australia circuit to back in the States?
Yeah, very unsuccessful one, Peter, as you know. But for that was just chasing a dream, which is cool. I got into it when I was sort of sitting in a sand pit at Naracoorte Tennis Club, just up the road from where I am tonight, and um, you just sit there watching while your mum and dad play tennis, and the whole town was playing tennis back in the 80s.
Yeah.
And so then you get your shot by jumping out of the sandpit and having a hit between matches, and you kind of sort of the rest. It's either do nothing or play some sports. So that was kind of how I got into sport, and it was for me. It was tennis, field hockey, and a bit of cricket when I could get there, and that
Okay.
was my sports. But frankly, it was just in the town. It was just pick a sport and go for it.
But see, that's the thing right there, though. I mean, you said it like chasing a dream. That's one of the things that I've really picked up about you, in our time getting to know each other, is that anytime you have that vision, you manifest it. And as life goes, it doesn't always go how you intend it to sometimes, but it's one of those things where you're a go-getter. And I think that's one of the most important personality traits and just really just that willpower and discipline to get things done. So what would you say has been the biggest motivation?
Sorry, I just broke up. The biggest motivation at that point.
What has been the biggest motivation for that drive?
Yeah. I, I think it's on the positive side, it does what you just sort of described a little bit, keeps things moving, trying things. I don't know. I think a lot of it is you just sort of have this instinct, either from your parents or from the people around you, that maybe you can do better, or there's always something more to be done, and all that. And I think that's good. I think on the other side, I think the thing I've got to be more wary of, and I've gotten better with it as age, is enjoy the present more, enjoy the current day. Perhaps it's okay where you're at, and enjoy that. So the disruption comes with a cost, and I think, but I think for a long time it's been really helpful to keep moving forward, whatever that means. But yeah, honestly, I don't really know the origin, other than just it could be a strength in many times, in many ways, and as you know well, it can be a perhaps unsettling on other fronts.
Because when it doesn't manifest how you want it, then it's an issue.
Yeah, or do you always have to be changing and chasing new stuff and trying to develop it and evolve it? So I don't know. It's a good question.
Well, as an optimizer, I find that it's one of those things where it's just a general trait of you see an issue and you want to correct it. And for the listeners, you're a financial optimizer. You help companies get their stuff in line. You've built stuff in the community, especially over at Kimball Elementary. We'll touch in on that in a little bit. But just in terms of when you approach a new situation, you always make it better. And I find that absolutely loving, because it's a healing trait. I don't know if you recognize that, but you're a healer, man.
I try. That's certainly an angle that I would, that feels right to me. That trying to make things better, leave them better than what you got them. I mean, we've gotten so much, growing up and coming from middle of Australia sort of aspect, and then I mean, there's so much fortune with what I've had. So that's a good way of looking at it. That's the aspiration. Whether it always works, who knows? But it's fun trying.
I like that. So in terms of your financial background, I know that kind of avenue of the career path is put on hold, but for the listeners, again, what's some of your history and kind of work that you've done in the financial industry?
Yeah, my background, as you said, is I kind of my undergraduate degree was in accounting with but also organizational behavior, and then my MBA sort of emphasis on finance, but also leadership from Emory, both college degrees in the US. For me, I always say the sort of the accounting finance gets me the job, but the people leadership, the human behavior, the passion for leadership and management is what I really suggest keeps me the job, or adds value, or is really where I spend all my time. So it's what I love. So yes, finance roles, but really emphasis on hiring people, managing, leading people, retaining great people, and trying to help make their job enjoyable, make them. And if I feel like if they do that, they're enjoying the work more, they contribute more to the company, and the outcome is better. So that's the philosophy I take to it.
That's something that's so important, because I find that's always been the biggest crutch or flaw in any type of business that I've been in, whether it be a good experience or bad experience, that, just like poor communication, poor training, and poor hiring process is literally just like the Achilles heel of every major corporation, even small businesses. So I feel you on that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's never a destination, right? You just keep every day trying to move towards that optimal place of a fantastic place for you to work and manage and lead, and for the team members to work, manage, and be a part of. And if you ever get there, I think you're not being real. I think you're not thing. I think you're kind of like, oh yeah, we made it, we're perfect. Like that just doesn't exist. But if you can just keep challenging yourself, and to feel like the team members keep challenging you, it can be a really fun part to be on, or path to be on, or journey to be on together. So
see, that's the funny thing, is that I have experienced people in this world where they don't like that type of challenge. They want to have that kind of, you said it's not real, that perfection, and they want to make it, but there's no such thing. And I think that's one of the biggest delusions of our current world, is that like there is a perfect state that you can make it, that you can reach a state where you no longer have to work or do anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I see it so much, and that like that perception that there's this perfect balance, or whatever it is. And yeah, I think it's great to strive for. I think it's healthy in many ways, it's constructive in many ways, but it becomes maybe counterproductive when you start judging the fact that it's not perfect. But there's that space in there where it's constructive to challenge it and debate it and work to identify the weaknesses in it. And look, that's a really tough well to be in, to explore that. And I think you get your own feelings hurt, your own ego hurt at the same time as you grow and learn. And you come back, if you can come back the next day and go, wow, that was a pretty intense day, and then pick it up again, I think it does get easier. That the challenge of that gets easier the more you do it. And it's confronting though.
Well, it's overcoming that initial resistance and kind of like reflex to kind of contract and push away and rebel or repel from it.
Yeah.
Well, how would you say, because I think that's one of the things that I find really fascinating about this kind of coronavirus period that we're all in, is that this is the perfect opportunity for people to do that type of inner work, that inner looking, to address those own types of flaws and weak areas in their own lives. And I've seen a very drastic switch from a lot of people, but I've also seen a lot of regression in many. So I think that's one of the things where I kind of want to dive into with you, is that, I mean, as a leader in like the workplace and like as a family man, how do you actually successfully, or what are the odds of success, I guess you could say? What helps you get in that realm of the Goldilocks region for comfort and discomfort to actually address these types of issues and move forward and make drastic changes?
Yeah, look, honestly, I think, and it's funny, some of the work we've done together, Peter, you and I think captures it for me. It so often, you have to surround yourself with people that are willing to challenge you, but also forgive you, and let you speak through something, and it comes out and you're like, oh wait, yeah, that's not perfect. Like, let me unpack that a bit. And then like, you're a great person that would unpack it back and be like, well, you might say that, but here's how I experienced it growing up. And I was like, wow, you know what, that reframes it for me. And then you come back and I try again, and it's kind of a willingness to challenge. It's being able to forgive as you explore that frontier of your own thought, your own capacity, and then and then making connections with other people, right? Like being like, wow, you're not perfect, but I think you're such a strong person to explore with. Here's another great person to explore with. And that's, and I think those pathways you can just keep opening up. But it goes back to what I probably started with, which is having people around you that are willing to challenge you, but also willing to, be safe. Like, you can be like, yeah, I can grow with them around. They don't sort of judge you as that first person they met when you were 12 years old, and you're never allowed to change and evolve. And that. So yeah.
Oh man, you just touched up on every person that has a reunion coming up on like, don't judge me back from 12 years ago.
That's so true, isn't it? It's so true. It's so true. I'm just going to have to shut one thing over on the fireplace. I got it going here. Hang on.
Oh yeah, no, do your thing.
There we go. Sorry about that.
No, I find that fascinating, that you hit the nail on the head for me, where it's, you have to have someone that can also challenge you and address those issues, but have the understanding. And I mean, it's like forgiving is almost like a vulnerability as well, where it's, you're open to actually perceive and experience, because that's one thing that I feel our cultures just globally are, I would say that it's stopping that trend. It's kind of declining right now, but like the judgmental society, the peer pressure society, the past narrative type of society is slowly fading away. And there's nothing more detrimental to a person's growth than like the self-persecution that you get from yourself or from a bad team around you.
Yeah, no, you're right on, Peter.
Well, that brings me to the point in your response. You took a family of young children and your wife on a worldwide adventure, and I'm so curious to just dive into how that experience went.
Yeah, I think the credit's got to go more to my wife than me. She took us on, and you know me, Peter. I stepping off the treadmill of life for me was a big challenge. But Whitney was our leader on this one, and
Love it.
and the three kids. That was more just we found a window in time that we could do it, and we thought now we have, you just don't know. I think we've had some events where a dear friend of Whitney, her husband, passed away very suddenly, and there's moments where we're just like, you know what, we just don't know. There's no guarantee on time, so we took it, and we started it, and it was an amazing adventure. We packed up everything and one bag each, as we kind of called it, and then plus a few little car seats and things like that. But it was very much a cluster, as you would imagine, on the road, and but one that we are really grateful for has started. It hasn't obviously turned out with my mom's illness, and then second COVID, but we got 5 months of amazing experience, and then the last 7 or 8's been certainly different than we ever imagined.
Yeah, different type of adventure.
yeah, but we've learned a lot, and we have a lot to be grateful for, and it's been an experience.
Well, what countries and area and like cities did you get to hit on the journey?
Yeah, we did kind of a month wrapping up in Seattle, which sounds funny, and then as we kind of moved out of the house, and then we had a week driving, or 10 days driving across America to Iowa, which
Love it.
was a great road trip. But I will tell you, on day 2, I think we hit rock bottom. We had some meltdowns of the kids, and we're like, oh my God, we had day 2 and we are about to die. And then we had a month in Iowa in July, which was really fun. We went to I didn't even know the head of hot air ballooning is in Iowa, an hour south of Des Moines. So, we just went and explored these places. And then we went Costa Rica for 6 weeks, back to Seattle for some appointments and see some friends for 10 days. And then we were in Tahiti for a month, and that was just magic. And then Costa Rica was magic too, but Tahiti was extra magic because I think we got better. Like, we were month 3 at that point, and month 4, and we learnt this rhythm better, and I was in a better spot, and I had unwound my work craziness, and we were better at managing things. We'd learned a lot of lessons in the first few months, and then we got to Australia basically for Halloween, and then had a non-American Halloween in Australia, which was interesting, and then unfortunately, frankly, within about 10 days, my mum's diagnosis came through. So we still did the best we could with family to enjoy a summer in Australia, but it was in the backdrop of surgery for mom, chemo for mom, and that. So it's but the Australian summer is still, I would argue, one of the most magical things to experience. It's a lot like a Pacific Northwest July and August, right? It's just
love it.
It's just a magic time of year to be around. And so we did that. But then I would argue then the realities of sort of the world hit in March, April, and I probably bottomed out about March into April, beginning of April, with mum's diagnosis being terminal, and mum's and then moving into, and then trying to adjust the fact that our travel had stopped, but then moving in, and then COVID shut down even our options. So it's been crazy. So,
well, you touched up on a really important point, that it kind of comes into like the dual aspect of how we live, where it's, when you're a go-getter, when you're all about that action and you want to get things done, like yourself, you're an achiever, you're a doer, and you have to put it on pause. I love how you said it, stepping off the treadmill of life, because there's really no graceful way to dismount when it's going full speed.
No, I definitely just whacked straight into the wall, and the thing's still churning you as you're sort of trying to get off the mat. That's right. That's it. That's why they tell you not to put it up against a wall so that you can actually just fall off onto the floor. So yeah, that's what it feels like a bit for us right now. But yeah,
It's so important to have that. I mean, it's kind of like breathing, it's the contraction, relaxation. It's that dual aspect to existence that you have to have a pause every now and then. And as I always like to say, everything is grace in some way, shape, or form. So I always find it beautiful when you see that, your journey and your adventure ended up taking you back home, and then all this stuff ended up happening. Like, and then the lockdown, because imagine if you were somewhere else and you couldn't even come back, right?
yeah, and that's right. And frankly, my sister just got out of isolation for 14 days earlier today. Like, so she was in London, and pregnant with her baby that's now 3 months old. So, she had a baby in COVID in London, and then once they figured out after it was born all the steps to get home and all that. So we literally, through her eyes, have just experienced what that craziness has been like. So
Yeah.
the roller coaster then of trying to get flights back from London and get home to see mom and put the baby in mom's arms, which happened like 4 hours ago. So
I love it.
It's been crazy. It's been crazy.
Yo, that's such a wild, I mean, it's such a wild thing, but that's life. It kind of just throws you those curveballs, and you got to swing.
Yeah, that's right. That's so true, mate.
Well, I'm curious in terms of I guess you would say the progression of kind of like your disconnect from like the financial world and the Naracoorte newspaper. Like, how did that manifest?
They feel surprisingly close connected, to be honest. It's that's been a real highlight, in many ways. It feels like I've reconnected with my hometown.
Yeah.
I basically made up for 20 years of being away in about 12 weeks. So it's been that intense. But yeah, for the home newspaper shut after 145 years. My mum had worked there for 35 years. She retired a number of years ago, but the Naracoorte Herald had been a real part of our family, right? Like mum had worked there for 35. I mean, I was, you grew up in your parents' office and running around and playing on the chairs and whatever. So, and everything we seemed to do in the town evolved around selling an ad for the paper, taking a picture for the paper, or writing a story for the paper, right? You just got dragged around by your parents doing that stuff. And
I love it.
so when it shut down in the beginning of the pandemic, it kind of just seemed so crazy and counterintuitive that the community newspaper is folding in the time of a pandemic. Like, I was like, isn't that the exact time where you need that, right? Like, it was so opposite of a community and what you would do if you had the paper. So we tried to find, I was thinking, oh, let's try and find somebody in the town. Maybe I could support it, either financially or just, I had nothing going on right then. So I was like, maybe I could just help out, whatever. And then I realized that maybe there wasn't, it was going to be a bigger lift to do it. And so it became I called it our passion project at the time. And as my wife will tell you, she feels like I always need something crazy like that going on. So this one fit the bill, and we went sort of 24/7 for 20 days to get it up and running, from April 20th to May 6th was the first edition. So it's like 16, 17 days. And then, but then that was really, once you got the first one done, you're like, okay, that's great. But then you're like, oh my God, we got a newspaper to do next week. Right. And at that time I took one lady into being a journalist for us. And so from then on, it was really nonstop for about 10, 12 weeks before we really sort of got some breath under us. And it was just hiring people, setting up managing the business. So honestly, it felt so close to what I'd been doing, just on a smaller scale from a money perspective and a client dollars, but on a much bigger scale from my own life, right? Like, this is my hometown. This is like the community. And this is kind of trying to connect with everybody to share this is their paper. So how do we make it theirs? And at the beginning, it was just me. And then it was one other person. It was like just these little pieces of people coming together going, all right, if we really look at this is so overwhelming and we're failing so much all day, every day. But surely if we just keep trying to do one more newspaper next week, maybe you'll get a little bit closer. And the community, but the community was amazing. They just kept going, no, like we'll spend our $2 each week and buy it and have a read and give you feedback. And then they would contribute more, and then they'd bring more. And it became, I think they realized we weren't capable of actually doing it ourselves. And they kind of stepped in and helped make it their paper. And there was kind of, I don't know where it was, but there was somewhere around sort of 6, 8, 9 weeks in where we got to edition 6, 7, 8. They kind of took it over a bit, which was good. And we've still got the people and but they really, the advertisers and the sponsors and the community said, all right, we got this. And we're still doing it and part of it, but it's their work that's made it possible, and it's their work that's made it real. So
I love that. I love that development, because it's so important to actually have, I mean, it's a service for the community, and now it's actually established and built by the community. And I think there's nothing more beautiful than seeing that, especially in this world of modern, corporate globalization, owning and running everything.
Yeah. I mean, and then when you ask for help, like people are like, oh, you need a bit more sport. I was like, oh, great idea. Like, okay. So one of my team members, she's awesome and connected, Danielle, and we're like, okay, how do we get more sport? And well, we just started sending some emails out and just saying, hey, I think you've got sport coming up. Would you mind contributing to it? And we went from like a really hard fought, maybe 1,000 words, which is essentially a page with some advertising. And the last 4 weeks, we've had over 7,000 words of contributions from the community for the sports that are going on in the area. Like, it's crazy. No, it's just magic. And these reports are all over the place. Like, people are like very serious about their sport, boom, 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 boom. And then there's people completely taking having a fun time with it. It was like, oh yeah, this person was playing golf and they hit the club and it fell off, and the head, just describing the most funny experience on a golf course. So we've got, it's their paper, mate. And but it's been a hell of a ride to get it stood up and get the businesses behind it, it's been a roller coaster. And one that's then challenged the family ties again. Okay, with Whitney, we're like, we were here in this space of just us, and now we have this community paper, and I'm working 24/7 again for a period. It's getting better now, but it was a bit of a shock on all fronts,
especially from vacation mode.
Yeah, and of course, me, Peter. Yeah, me, Peter. I don't handle those transitions gracefully, right? It's like, there's no edging my way forward. It's like, okay, great, boom, we're in, and then just flip the switch, and we went from standing start to 24/7. Like tonight, I just picked up the paper and we drove it down from Mount Barker, which is about 3 hours away, and dropped it off at 5 locations on the way. And I've got with me my 18-month on the car. So, it's just like, we're just kind of just like changing nappies, dropping some papers off.
I love it.
Another night of owning a little country newspaper. It's been pretty fun, pretty crazy.
Yo, that's awesome. I mean, the multitasking ability is always awesome, but it's so wild to me when, obviously you say that it's, the transitions, yours are just a little different. They start faster and they go a little bit longer, but then you have that relaxation and grace period. But you're building things. And I think that's the most beautiful stuff, is that everything that I've seen you do and strive for has been building a community and touching back on what you said earlier, leaving it better than how you found it. And I think that's just a necessary understanding and trait of the world that really needs to be applied to everyone. Because how many things have I seen, just like businesses falling apart, communities falling apart because no one wants to get engaged, from nothing to something, and now it's actually got its own momentum and inertia, and now it's self-established from the community getting engaged and involved. That's a beautiful thing, honestly, because I really wish that we had more things like that within our community out here, because it's still small scale, but it's a bigger impact.
Yeah, it's been intense.
And I think this is the perfect transition point to talk about some of the local Seattle work you did at Kimball Elementary. So I don't know if you could tell the listeners a little bit about the situation. Again, changed and uplifted the community.
Yeah, I think like Kimball for us is our home, right? Where I think there's always something special where it was the first home we'd ever owned. We've been renting for, Whitney and I individually for sort of 15, 16, 17 years
Yeah.
on our own, and together for the last five of that, renting homes, renting apartments and that. But that was our first home we bought in Beacon Hill, Seattle, and across the road was from Kimball Elementary. We're big believers in the public school system, and so that's where she was going to go to school, and our oldest, and then hopefully the others behind it. So, and it was an amazing community because, coming from Australia, which is, essentially a white Australia. I mean, especially in context of America, and particularly in the Deep South, where I'd been for many years of the US, and then Kimball was this, spot where it's again so multicultural, where the white students were about 23% of the student population. So it was just an incredible experience for Scarlett, our oldest, to start school there. And then as a parent to become involved in that community. It was just like when I first walked into my first university experience, or got off that Greyhound bus in 1995 in Lafayette, Louisiana, when I sat in the first classroom I ever did in January 1998 in Columbus, Georgia. The difference of the social mix of the classroom there and that experience, and then seeing Scarlett go to school in inner city Seattle. They were just, somewhat out of body experiences, and then became really real, really quick, as the realness of the challenges that it takes to function in a community like that. So, not really answering your question, but essentially the challenge that I think was very old school, very underinvested by Seattle Public Schools, a system that's deeply challenged, trying to get resources to what I consider the real thing, to the students, into the classroom. And so I joined the Parent Teachers Association and tried to and just learn a lot from other parents, learn a lot from the kids and the experience, and the rest is history. But we can jump into it a bit, the whole social equity and the assessment of schools. You
already know.
And then that journey with the Kimball community was an amazing one. So.
Well, because I think that's the stuff that gets me in terms of like how they actually chose what schools were going to get the funds and the resources. I mean, you pretty much call them out on their nonsense and the lack of logic and even structure to determine that. So what was your experience, and what did you end up finding in terms of how Seattle was distributing funds to schools and the communities in need?
Yeah, I think there was this sort of cycle of analyze for equity, implement for politics. And you had all these sort of well-intentioned, and come from a place that everyone's just trying to do their job. But you had this systematic structure that sort of considered the south of Seattle and said, yeah, you know what, we really need to get resources in there. We really need to get teachers and school supports and supplies and all that in there. And then you get to the reality of the implementation, and it's like, oh, wait, no, we can't do it this year because we've got the schools in the north part of Seattle that need this, and next one, and all the politics of the north, and the wealth of the north, and we've got a spare school in the north to rotate schools through, so it's easier for us to replace schools in the north. And the schools in the north are smaller, are more boutique schools, so they're easier to rebuild, and you can move them to an interim site. Oh, we have all the practical justifications for resource allocation. And it meant by the time we got to 2018, we literally had sort of arguably, well, it was obvious the Seattle Public Schools was showing you a $300 million imbalance between our region of the South versus the North. And that was assuming it was equal to start off with, which it wasn't. So you would argue it was at least probably a 500 million to $1 billion, probably unequal or unequal allocation of resources over 30 years. And it was just being perpetuated. And so and then when the replacement levy came up, they call it BEX, or Building Excellence Fund, that voters vote on every 6 years. It's essentially a $1.2 billion levy. They assessed it for, they claim for the first time based hugely weighted on equity, which I thought meant schools like Kimball were absolutely going to get to the front of the queue. The rest is history, but we didn't on the first run. But when it was properly better applied, we did, and that was a real win. I never thought we as a community would win like that. Frankly, you just don't win those ways. They announced it, and Kimball was 16th. Only about 6 to 8 schools get replaced every 6 years.
Wow, every 6 years? I didn't realize that.
Oh no, it's crazy. In a 104 school system, I mean, they're basically saying every 60 years you'll get a new school, which is crazy, and which is right. That's not good. So massive underinvestment, and but with a lot of community engagement, a lot of community work, and a small team of people working massively focused on this, we got them to reassess it. We had a lot of good support from local politicians and community members, and it was a real team effort behind the scenes to get the analysis redone, and thankfully a result that got Kimball a new elementary school on that levy.
Well, it was pretty run down from my memory, if it serves it correct, from back then.
Yeah, it was built for about 200 odd students in the 70s. It had 415 students when our daughter was there, and it didn't even have fire suppression sprinklers in half the buildings. I mean, was it loved? Absolutely. Did the teachers do a wonderful job? And this is where, again, some of the communities struggled with this. You can love the place and love what it means, and you can love how well the classrooms were done with what they had, right? I mean, it was a very special place in that way. But you can also not be accepting that this was the best environment that we were capable as a city and as a state of delivering for students. And there's no windows in classrooms. The library wasn't, it was a cool little library, but it could have been so much better for learning and just an experience. So.
Well, I mean, you said it best. You're over like 150% capacity, like if at best, and that's the stuff that kills me, is that, I'm a big fan of like public services and actually having things that are meant to uplift people, free public education. But when it's so mismanaged, it becomes a detriment. Like, those were fire hazards. Those were legitimate concerns. And just to be able to see someone like rally the community together and actually go against like the giants and actually get something changed was so impactful, especially for a school in the South that, what you said, does serve such like a diverse community. And I know you got some resistance on that 100%, which is so fascinating to me. And like, I'm just curious, where do you think that stuff comes from? Like, you touched on it a little bit, but
I think the same thing I perhaps suggested that some of the political leaders here are struggling with. Like, was the communication perfect? No, we didn't have the resources to communicate with I think we started off fairly well, but then as the work became 24/7 to get Seattle Public Schools to reconsider the analysis and all that took, did we have time to sit there every day, every 5 days or twice a week to sit down with all the families and explain what was happening and explain what our messaging was to the civic leaders? Was not that this is a bad school, that this is a great school, and because it's a great school, it deserves a great facility and a great, and because it's a diverse community, it expects an environment that can cater for all these different communities. And we of course we didn't do that well. We weren't resourced. We had 5 different languages trying to communicate in, and it was costing $700 for every little newsletter or leaflet to translate it into those 5 languages for 1 page. So we only had a limited, and not to make excuses, but I learned so much about the challenge of where do you allocate resources in that kind of civic battle to
Yeah.
win this thing, and we did win. Like I had no expectation that we would ever get that resource change. I thought we were fighting for the next levy in 6 years' time, where we'd lose now, but they'd remember us and wouldn't make the same mistake again, right? Like that's really when you have a little bit of a chance to impact. It blew me away. I mean, we were trying so hard to change today, and it changed today. It was amazing. But yeah, I think that resistance came from there, Peter, and because at the end, when even the people that were challenging it and saying, well, we want this, we like, when you sort of really sat with them, you're like, but I love the school too, and I get that they do too, and they were coming from a position of love for the school, and 100%, and they felt that by saying we needed a new school, we were taking that love away from the school, and that's a tough one to argue against. It's certainly tough in the fierceness of trying to get lobby and administration to change its mind. You can't sit there and say, oh, by the way, it's a lovely school, but we really need to change it, because the psyche of those institutions won't hear that, right? They'll just say, oh, you love your school, great, and move on. And you're like, no, the South deserves new schools too. And so you have to lead a lot with the negative to get the message out there, and not the negative as in it's bad, with the reality that hey, kids in the South deserve new schools, and that was just fundamentally at the bottom of their list. And I absolutely passionately believe that Seattle and Washington State was in a position that these schools are woefully under-resourced, and this was a small way of getting there. So.
Well, hopefully that your experience at Kimball and just everything that you guys fought for actually does make some type of systematic change, that they can't always just BS people.
Yeah,
get called out.
I think it did from that. I think I think those things always do two things, Peter. And I think this is where this is why it's worth doing, is it shows to others that you can affect change, right? It shows that we were able to be successful, and that will hopefully just inspire. I mean, we had a lot of other groups going, whoa, how do we get that? How do we help? What did we learn? What did you use? And so we helped them with that. We shared what we did, and that. And then the second one is out of the change that we've got like Old Van Assel in the South, which is the interim school down there, is getting massively expanded. So now we have the infrastructure to change and look, having school kids go to these off-site interim site schools is a pain. I get it. It's a pain for everyone, and you have to pay it forward, and that's a nightmare. But we now have a capacity of school in the South that can enable all the schools to get replaced in time, and which is a structural shift, which was one of the big excuses used as to why the northern schools would always end up getting the money, because it's like, oh, but we've got these one or two interim sites up north, so look, we'd love to replace that school in the South, but we can't because we don't have enough interim sites. Oops, we haven't. Oh my God, we're in a rush.
So sorry.
We've got it. But we really tried. Like, again, it was analyzed for equity, implement for politics, and that was kind of a 25 to 30 year, and frankly beyond that legacy. And it was amazing to be a part of us, and a credit to there's amazing people in our community. The Kimball community had just an amazing array of people that contributed in their own way to make that happen. And it was absolutely an amazing community effort. And I'll call it that silent group of just incredible contribution was amazing.
Yo, those stories are so inspirational for people. And I feel like, again, because you're creating that systematic infrastructure change. And I feel like that's always the true, what would you say? It's the true characteristic of a good leader and a good optimizer and just really a good healer, is that it's like Buckminster Fuller said, it's like if you want to create a new system, you have to make it so much better that it makes the other one obsolete, just due to efficiency and just being better. So I think there's nothing more powerful than that, because again, it's how, in truth, as I see it objectively, all it took was one person speaking up against it. And then from there, it kind of got everyone else to kind of turn their heads and be like, yeah, that's right. That's true. And it just goes to show that the true impact that one person can make, to be that source of inspiration, that source of action, that source of drive and doing. It's so beautiful, man. It's so beautiful to see.
And I would just add to that, you're right, is you don't know which one person has the influence on the one decision maker on the other side. And so that's why you assemble a bunch of one people,
right?
And then when you add it all up, it was an amazing impact. And it was one of the most highest octane outcomes I've ever been a part of, was here fighting for this community school, massive diversity. And it was amazing. It was an amazing experience. I learned so much. It was just grateful to be a part of. And you literally look at all the little things that had to go right to have it work. It was great. It's still crazy to me. Like, it's still so off the charts crazy to get a school from 16th on the list, not even a chance of getting a new school, to 4th on the list, getting a new $75 million school. And the levy got passed, not just slightly passed, but 72% pass rate on the levy, which was amazing.
Wow.
And just seeing the inspiration of the lift it gave of so many in the community. And I think with time, it just brings so much. It brings a certainty to the future, and hopefully the access can be preserved. Right, the diversity of Kimball is magic, and you worry about the gentrification of the city and all that, but hopefully, one of my arguments was, by building it now, you make it more accessible to all the people that live there now, and that can catch more people, right? Like, if you wait another 10 or 20 years, it'll serve a different thing, but you just do it now, get it now, and you catch more people. So
yeah. Well, man, I think it's when you make those types of systematic changes to corrupt politics and you actually transform something to serve its true purpose again, there's nothing more magical than that. So again, like, I love just to see, like, wherever you go, you're building community, whether it be the corporate community or like the tight-knit neighborhood community to like the city community. So I love it, man. It's so cool to see that. That's, if you really got to look at it, man, like, you are a healer and you've always been that. And I think it's one of the most beautiful things is that you have to, I mean, it's all about that action. And I mean, again, it just comes to the point for the listeners. It's like, there's really no such thing as failure. As long as you're learning that lesson, it's like, how'd you learn how to read, write, talk, walk? It's like you stumbled and bumbled repeatedly until you got it and you hit that stride. And it's those
I would push back. I push back on you sometimes. Like,
I love it.
There's absolutely lots of failure, but that's okay.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Like, so it's, I think that's your point too, right? Like, I think it's just getting used to my daughter, one's a perfectionist. It's like, and she just, it's such a, and we see ourselves in her, Whitney and I see ourselves in her, and we just cringe at the perfectionist streak. And we're like trying to be like, no, failure's good. Just keep failing all the time. Don't worry about it. But I struggle with that. So there is failure. And I wish I'd realized that a lot sooner. Was just like, you know what, that just keep
You're
failing.
Meant to fail. It's how you grow. It's like, you can't grow without conflict, and it doesn't need to be, or tension, and it doesn't need to be something that's bad. And I think that's the thing of our society, is where we kind of angle all these things into being like, you failed, you're bad, you did wrong. And that's something that just hinders all types of like mentality for growth, because then you think you need to hit that 100% every time, and you set these unrealistic goals, and like, it's a burnout path as I see it.
That's right. Well said.
Because again, like, you're a very powerful healer. And I think, honestly, if the world had more people that had your heart to really want to help change and help people grow and help people succeed, then the world would be a better place. And that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to highlight you specifically on Creatives Chat, is because you are that light that this world needs right now. And, and you have a great partner, and you have your great team, and you guys all kind of uplift everyone around you. And I think it's so beautiful. And it truly is, despite everyone's shortcomings and their flaws, to bring it home, you have the perspective to understand that you need to challenge that, but you also have to forgive yourself and forgive others and have that letting go ability. Because so many people live in an operation where they're always holding onto the hot pan, and they're always pain and they're always hating it, but it's like, just let it go.
Yeah.
Put it down.
So true. That's such a good analogy.
Oh, thanks, man.
Do you have another question before I pop in?
Oh, no, yeah, dude, pop in.
All right. Hello.
How's it going?
Perfect, Rusty. How are you, mate?
Thank you so much for joining us, Michael. I've been so inspired by your story. I have to say, it's truly incredible how your life has unraveled.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's
Right. It's kind of,
that's
I'm kind of wondering, like, what's the next 5 years going to hold for you? What kind of
yeah,
plans do you
yeah.
have for the future that you
Well,
might
for
envision
us,
yourself? Yeah, for your family and
yeah. I
yourself.
mean, we're still making plans, although given the fact that not one plan that we've made in the last 18 months has been actually correct for more than about 90 days. So I don't know if that's brave or stupid at this point, but we'll keep making plans because like as I always said in business, no budget ever survives the first day, right? You do a budget, the first day it's gone, it's useless. But you did it because it was a process that hopefully you grew from and developed. And to me, building these plans is the same sort of thing. Reflect, plan, and then go and try and do it, knowing that the plan will change the moment it starts. And so we're going to keep doing those plans. We're wrestling with 3 months, 6 months, 9 months out right now. So we're all over the place. And Whitney's just got accredited to work in a hospital here
nice.
in Adelaide. So she's exploring that, and that transition, of course, is a shock for us all. And there's several, like the last week I had the girls, all three of them and me, for 3 days in a row because she was just on 14-hour sort of shifts 3 days in a row. And yeah, I mean, that shit show is real. It's every bit of the cost that you expect it would be. Not winning any parenting goals on that one. But so where do we evolve from here is anyone's guess, Rusty. But we're just going to try to create some like enjoyment as a family and that focus, and then at the same time explore career and whatever that means for us now. That's what Whitney and I are both struggling with that a little bit. Like, how much is it money versus hours worked? How, travel is different now, right? Like the concept of traveling for work as a risk is kind of strange. Maybe it's not as real anymore, but I think it will be when this lifts. So yeah, we'll see.
That's so interesting.
So a long way to answer, not very effectively.
Well, I tend to make 5-year plans, and like you said, within the first 90 days, I'm already revising them. But good. Having goals, and then I think that's the most important things is having some sort of purpose to strive towards. And like I say, if you aim for the stars, you'll hit the moon. And it's one of those things that plans versus no plans, the chance and I would say the possibility of something happening without making any plans at all are very slim to none, versus at least making something and heading in some sort of direction.
Well, you're right. I called a dear friend today on the way down. I drove 4 hours with the paper to this evening, and I called him and said, look, let's commit. I want to commit to sending you my goals in the next 2 weeks. And I said, just hold me accountable to that, because it's time to refresh them. And for that exact purpose, nothing more than they'll be all wrong and but just getting them down again on paper and sharing them with a dear close friend, and then having him just talk about them with me, or just letting me talk about them with him, will be it's an absolutely worthwhile exercise.
Yeah. So, I'm going to paraphrase a couple quotes.
Practice.
I think John Lennon might have said something to the fact that life is what happens in between the plans we make.
That's correct.
And
so true.
And another quote by Charles Darwin, something to the effect that it's not the strongest of the species that survive or the most intelligent, it's the ones that are the most adaptable. It's a paraphrase. But what I've seen from your story so far is that every time something's happened, you've adapted.
Yeah.
Flexible. Like you have insurmountable flexibility, is from my experience so far. And that to me is the sign of a true survivor. Like no matter what it takes, you're able to bend and make do. So kudos to you and your family for making adjustments during this whole 2020.
Thanks, but I give that credit to the people you have around you. I think it's kind of where we got back to the start, Peter, too. It's like,
oh yeah,
you gotta, if you have those people around you that give you that forgiveness, but also give you that space to change and evolve, and then that unconditional partnership, and that I've had that both relationship with you, Peter, and obviously with my wife and the kids, but also my family, and some really dear friends around. So I think looking back, again, better lucky than smart, but having those sorts of people around has pushed me to do that. And you know, it's really fortunate, and more than I ever realized until some of these moments.
You know, it's interesting because with my experience with startups and the startup realm, all the mentors, investors say the most important thing to any startup is team. I've had it like numerous investors all said the same thing: team, team, team. That's what matters most. Yeah. And that applies to family. And, you know, we think about it on the corporate level, but on the personal level, the support team that we have with us is just as vital to having a prosperous and fulfilling life. So absolutely, mate. I would agree with you 100% on that.
Yeah. Love it. I love it. Oh man.
Also, let's talk about failure real quick, because we touched about it last week, and it's one of my favorite topics. I love discussing failures because to me, failures are just an opportunity to learn. To me, life is a process of elimination. And so only through failure do we realize what doesn't work. Like we're just one step closer to something that will work. Like, okay, life is hit or miss. And the thing is, if you don't take that shot, you won't know, you won't improve your aim. And so it's all about practice, practice, practice. And that includes making mistakes and having that forgiveness. That is vital. And self-forgiveness, especially, is just as vital. But having a team around you that supports you, says, okay, shake it off, do it again. That's incredible to have that support team. So,
and I've found having a couple of mentors has been, on top of that, friends and family and people around, somebody that's experienced enough that they can talk with you, like, and help you talk it out yourself. So they're not implying their life on yours, but they're also coming from a space where they're like, you're like, okay, and you've been through this, like they're 10 or 20 years ahead of you in life, and they've got reflection that is different. And I just, for me, it's carried that extra weight of like, all right, I may want to deny what they've just said or discount it or be like, no, this failure does mean the world and I need to just give up now and move on, like that. And yet their words are like, no, this is compared to this failure in my life, or this is what happened when I thought I'd failed, and then 3 more steps later it succeeded. I'm like, that's where I would say that it just triggered me, Rusty, with that comment was what made the difference to me in those failure moments so often was that mentor, just checking back in with that mentor, just describing the failure, and frankly trying to convince them that it was failure and that I should change and go off in another direction. And then often sometimes they'd be like, yeah, you're right, you have completely failed, and move on. But most of the time it's like, it's sort of that darkest before the dawn, right? Like it's just, no, you're 3 more steps away and then you're going to be there. And geez, they're right. So often they're right. And, but gee whiz, it takes a bit of courage from them and take courage from them, right? The right mentor to tell you to keep going when they know you could just be heading into more failure and misery. But it takes someone that really cares about you to sort of wish you through that to get to the end. So
there's a fine line between fierce determination and insanity.
It is. No,
it's so true.
And if you're not falling off that fence consistently, like I feel like it's walking on that fence, and you should be falling on both sides of that, not just one side all the time.
True.
Like if you're always on the side of insanity, you probably got to, you're jumping out of planes without a parachute. But if you're always falling on the other side where it's always so safe, you're probably not going for it. So that's a great.
I love the way that was put, you guys, because that's the truth. Because you can't, I mean, again, it's how many people are in this position in their life where they've done the same thing over and over, but it's always those subtle pivots to how you're doing it or how you're processing it more so, and how you're perceiving the situation that can be that next step and next level. And that's something that's so important to actually have that ability to take those. I mean, I guess you would say it's a calculated risk. It's a little crazy to some, and it's always crazy to people that don't have that mentality that things can be achieved, but you can never enter into the new realm of the unknown without crossing past that barrier and that threshold of what you currently experience and know. And I think it's a courage, it's a vulnerability, it's the challenging, it's the letting go. It's like, it's the total encompassing factors of what really makes a person in truth. So I love that. Like, mentorship is huge. That's why I'm happy with what I do. I find I've created a network, and life has graced me with mentors that I've helped and have helped me. It's always a thing. You sit there and talk me up, Michael, but it's like, no, man, just seeing like your determination, your drive, your healing ability, it made me understand that small scale impact can have such a huge profounding effect, and that you can do whatever you want. Like you said, chasing dreams, but man, you manifest them.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Well done.
Well, I'd like to thank you for coming on our show, Michael. It's been a pleasure getting to know you.
Thanks, Rusty.
Yes, and I have to say that it has been truly inspiring for me, because like just doing the country newspaper, just making do with what you have and dealing with the COVID and with your family situation. We pray for your mother, and I understand there's some grieving going on, and there's also a bunch of adjusting going on. So pray for you and your family and for the strength to get through all this. And thank you again for being on Creatives Chat.
Thank you for you both. Cheers,
Thanks,
Rusty.
Man.
Cheers, Peter. Bye, guys.
Man, you guys have a great night.
Well, let's end on this. So let's continue to express our truths with clarity and purpose, and together we can create peace and harmony in our community. Cherish every moment and have a happy always.
Peace.
That concludes this episode of Creatives Chat. Thank you for watching. Join us every Thursday at 3:33 p.m. Pacific Daily Time as creative minds get together and chat about who knows what. View more episodes on our YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks again to our sponsors for making this show possible.
Thanks for joining us.